All right, I'm joined now by Christian Pina of the Gambling Podcast. He's also our UFC contributor at BangTheBook.com. We got 2 title fights here this weekend for UFC 235 in Las Vegas. Christian, how's it going today, man?
Good, man. Finally, a weather update as I do every week here. It is gorgeous, 70s and sunny in Vegas. I know you're finally getting over a little bit of sickness here, so I think we're finally out of the gambling winter and the real life winter apocalypse that we're at here, huh?
It's still cold here. I was looking at the March forecast, and we're not going to warm up until the middle of the month. So I don't know. Maybe I just need to come out there and enjoy the 70-degree weather. By the way, with you being out in Las Vegas, can you do me a huge favor? Go track down Bryce Harper. Tell him to sign with somebody so I can finish my damn baseball writing.
It's funny. MVP odds and Cy Young odds came up out here in Vegas yesterday, and Bryce Harper is the NL MVP favorite without a team right now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. In fact, I saw that some division futures are off the board now at some of the offshore places because everyone's waiting to see where he's going to wind up going. Hopefully that happens here in the very near future, and who knows, maybe it'll happen by the time everybody hears this segment on our Friday edition of Bang the Book Radio, as we are recording Thursday afternoon here. So some of these odds most definitely may have moved by that point in time. So keep that in mind as you're breaking down the card. But let's start with the main event for UFC 235 here. Title fight in the light heavyweight division. Anthony Smith is talking a lot in the lead up to this fight, Christian. Does he have a chance to pull the upset?
He has a more of a chance than the odds would indicate, and truthfully, a little bit of money. Again, this UFC is a little bit different, and the public loves to bet a little to win a lot. So his prices actually kind of come down a little bit. Jon Jones was in the neighborhood of minus 950. Currently sits about minus 895 as I look in town. Look, the heart of a fighter is something that cannot be understated, especially in a sport with such variance as mixed martial arts. Truthfully, when you kind of look at this from a blanket perspective, Jon Jones is better everywhere, and the odds kind of tell the story of that. And in a perfect world, Smith would kind of utilize the OSP type of game plan, which would be to blitz straight up the middle, get in close, and not allow Jon Jones to utilize that freakish reach that he is famous for. Not allowed to use that lateral movement and stick and move type of game that he's made famous at this point. People have doubted Anthony Smith his whole career, and all the guy does is win and win as an underdog. And like I said, there's something certainly to be said for this. But when you really break this down, I mean, Jon Jones is looking to make up for lost time, in my opinion, by taking these fights and doing all these type of situations. So this one, there's not a ton to say about it to me. There's certainly a fighter's chance, a puncher's chance, and Anthony Smith certainly has that. But all things being equal, this is Jon Jones' fight, and it's more of a when and not an if type of situation. Again, crazy variance of the sport aside, pure type of odds, probabilities. This is Jon Jones' fight going away here.
All right, so let's move on to the welterweight championship fight. There's a lot more to talk about with this one. As you wrote in your preview over at BangTheBook.com, I highly recommend that for everybody listening to this segment here. Tyron Woodley in the minus 150 range. Kamaru Usman is the underdog plus 120. Now, you and I were talking before we started recording here. There are a lot of intriguing things about this matchup.
Yeah, this is, to me, a guy like Tyron Woodley, to me, is... I know a lot of casual UFC fans hate the guy, and they hate him for a variety of reasons. They hate him the same way that boxing fans, quote unquote, hate Floyd Mayweather, because every fight is virtually by decision. As the theme of doing these previews with you, the one overlapping thing is I value fight IQ more than anything else, and nobody has more fight IQ than Tyron Woodley. He is I don't want to say perfect, but he is getting close to the perfect mixed martial artist from a mental perspective. He knows no matter the opponent, he knows exactly what to do, and he doesn't care whether people like it. Again, he's about cashing checks, winning championships. And to me, that type of fighter, again, much like a Floyd Mayweather, has proven to be a cash cow. It's a little bit reversed here, but it's something like betting an under in football or baseball, and it's nothing going into the fourth quarter or the ninth inning. It's boring, but when you're on the over in these type of situations, you absolutely love it, whether it be Floyd Mayweather by decision or Tyron Woodley by decision, or the over in these type of situations. And so, to me, again, Woodley is on another level. time and time again, both in the round props and being able to bet on him has been a treat, while people, still kind of get on him for the inactivity, while he just kind of does what he needs to do to retain his championship in advance. And on the other side, this is why this is such a compelling matchup here, because a guy like Guzman, who's pretty much been the most ducked fighter in the UFC for going on 6 months now, nobody wants a piece of him. And the reason this fight, and again, Usman's taken some serious money over the past day or two. I believe he's up around plus 180, plus 150, all the way down to the plus 120 as I look at the market right now. Usman has, there's a little bit of a Dillashaw Garbrandt feel to this fight, in that Usman may just do what Woodley does, but do it better, be more aggressive, where Woodley, is what I would call methodical and patient. Some would call boring. Usman, while he doesn't necessarily, finish a ton of fights, he's dominating decisions, because what he's doing within those, in those rounds is so much more active than anyone else, smothering people, striking. And if Woodley, is able, if he wants to kind of do what he's always done and be able to take that slow approach, feel each other out, if Usman kind of comes out on fire and just does that game plan better, there could be an upset here. But again, you can lose many times betting against a streak and only lose once betting on it. So for that, until I see Woodley, take that loss, I have to go with my guy that's been so good to me over his career, and that's Woodley. But this is a very tough matchup. I would say the toughest for Woodley since Wonderboy, even more than a guy like Darren Till, who again bet against Till in that situation, felt it was too much too soon. And truth be told, bet against Till on Wonderboy, and that the fight before that, because I thought it was too much too soon. So it's a very intriguing matchup for a variety of reasons, and casual fans may not like it, but the MMA purists are going to absolutely love this chess match of a back and forth fight.
Now, obviously, this could be dated by the time that listeners hear this on Friday, but do you think that this is the stopping point for this line? I mean, where do you sort of expect this thing to go as we get closer to the fight?
Again, yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell with this, because a guy like Woodley does not generate a ton of public support at the betting window, because frankly, people want to see him lose. He's not an exciting fighter. He's, the Delphi version of a point fighter, if you will. So it's a little bit weird, because I think the value is certainly gone from a guy like Usman. When you look at this across the board, when you look at past to victory for Usman, maybe his striking has definitely gotten better, but it's not on the caliber of Woodley. And people forget, Woodley has really evolved his game into this type of fighter when he was more one-dimensional. He's really kind of been come full circle a little bit here. So you'd think, all right, Usman has been so dominant in the takedown department. Well, then you look over at the other side of the board, and Woodley has a 94% takedown defense. So I get people taking the shot in the, upwards of plus 150 range. I think the line is probably, the value, quote unquote, is gone at this point, but I don't know if that's going to stop the public from, looking to bet against a quote unquote boring fighter in Woodley, and the quote unquote Nigerian nightmare at plus money makes sense. So I wouldn't recommend it now that the value's gone, but I could certainly see it getting down into the minus 130 even money type of range at most, but this is probably where it stays.
Another really intriguing fight here between Robbie Lawler and Ben Askren. This is the UFC debut for Ben Askren, and he's out here against a well-known commodity in Robbie Lawler as a minus 275 favorite over at DSI Sportsbook. This is another fight that you and I were talking about a little bit before we started recording here, that there are a lot of layers to this one too.
Certainly are. And for anyone that doesn't know Ben Askren, the UFC effectively made the first mixed martial arts trade in history to get him on the roster, trading Demetrius Johnson out to his organization, receiving his contract, and receiving Ben Askren back. Ben Askren is, he has been unbelievable. For anyone that's a fan of Khabib Nurmagomedov, this guy, Ben Askren, may have better chain wrestling than Khabib. And it's really something that sounds crazy to say, but I've never seen chain wrestling on this level. Now, on the feet, he has nothing. Let's just say that. When people always talk about, myself included, the quote-unquote striker versus grappler and all those cliches, this is the fight where all those, start from, all those terms. This is the purest striker versus grappler matchup I have probably ever seen inside the UFC. Robbie Lawler, so famous for, coming back from the dead and these blitzes and these seemingly impossible knockout victories, submissions, everything along the way. Lawler has the advantage in this fight as long as it stays on the feet. The thing about this is Lawler's coming off a torn ACL. We don't know the status of that injury. We don't know, kind of where he's at at there. And he has been, he's fought wrestlers in the past and done very well in the takedown defense department and all that type of stuff. So it's very, I hate to sound cliche and say that this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup, but this is the classic striker versus grappler. Askren is going to go for takedowns morning, noon, and night from the second the bell rings until the second the bell goes down. And if he is able to land just one, again, if Lawler stops 95% of them and he is able to get one, Lawler's not going to be able to get back up. That is how good Ben Askren is. If you have seen, early Khabib fights against, bottom of the barrel type of opponents where he was able to just smother them, and even Daniel Cormier to an extent in some situations, the Anderson Silva fight comes to mind where people hated that, where he just laid on top of him. That's the type of ability Ben Askren has to make, a fighter the caliber of Robbie Lawler look that badly. It's really incredible. If anyone hasn't seen, kind of his stuff in Bellator and the different type of, organizations he's been in, look it up and you're going to be amazed. And it's a weird fight because stylistically it's not great for a guy like Askren. And in theory, you would think that after effectively sending out, the greatest of all time to get Askren in return, I mean, this is how highly touted this kid is. And they did not want to leave him, let him go out of different organizations. Held championships every single where that he's gone. And this is just a little bit, you would think the UFC wants to get him a win here. I understand putting him up against a, caliber of opponent like this. It's just, if he is not able to land these takedowns, that minus 280 is going to be very bad. But again, people have said that about Khabib. Would he be able to land those takedowns on, anyone that he's fought along the way, including McGregor? He's always been able to eventually do it, and to the tune of an undefeated record. And that most likely is the case for a guy like Askren here. It's just the price is, really betting on that type of situation. So it's a little bit of a hyped up line. And for that situation, I can't really, with that much unknowns, I can't let somebody lay minus 280 straight bet or something like that. But the over certainly makes some sense. If Askren is going to do this, I would think it would be a decision unless it's a stoppage along the way or Lawler's knee gives out or that type of situation. So look for a different couple of angles in that situation in this fight.
Now, you and I have been talking a little bit of baseball here today off the air, and I want to sort of bring a baseball theme to this fight with Lawler being 36 now. Coming off of the ACL, got to figure, I don't know what the UFC aging curve looks like necessarily. It's not something I've ever really looked into, but how much does his age matter to you coming off of the big injury here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really more of the injury to me than the age. I mean, we see, quote unquote, older guys, in the UFC do well and we see them do bad. There's not really a blueprint to say, once, in the NFL, you see running backs fall off a cliff at age 30, right? And that's not really the case here because in truth, fight years are really what matters. And again, Robbie Lawler, certainly every bit of old in fight years as his actual age is. I mean, the guy has been through every single war out there. And in truth, when you look at this from a non, quote unquote, X's and O's standpoint, the UFC wants to get Askren this win off a notable opponent, and Lawler certainly does this. I would be more concerned about the injury than I would the age, if that makes sense. It's just, it is one more red flag. Would you like him to be younger? Of course, but the age doesn't matter so much as the punishment and the abuse he's gone. And again, MMA years in cage time certainly counts a lot more than, quote unquote, actual age for me.
Now, I believe we had 4 women's fights on last week's card, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. We've got 3 of them here on this card. Strawweight division matchup between Torres and Zhang. This one almost essentially a coin flip. Zhang a little bit of a favorite here.
Yeah, and this one, I mean, again, I was somebody who got in on the Tisha Torres train at about plus 120. This has come down a little bit here. It makes some sense. And again, that's not to say that I think that Torres is definitely the preferred side. It's just that was a little bit of a bad line, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people felt that way. And that's why you've seen some movement come in on the Torres side here. This one is, like you said, coin flip. It's different fighters going in different directions here. Tisha Torres being called the tiny tornado. It's really not the case here with her at this point in her career. She's kind of given up aggressiveness and the fury for patience, and she's more of a kickboxer. She's doesn't have the same at this stage of her career, doesn't have the same tools that she once had, doesn't have the same speed. And when you look at the other side and a girl like Zhang, it may be fair to say that she does everything Torres does better. She's an elite kickboxer, a professional kickboxer, and the rest of her MMA is certainly coming around. And if Zhang is able to get this, quote unquote, top 5 win here, she is a flashy fighter that the UFC can market as a finisher when in a division that does not have any. That being said, this is a Tisha Torres fight, so it's about 98% probable that it's going to go to decision. So I think that over makes some sense in a parlay. But Zhang is going to get a rocket strap to her back if she is able to get this notable name victory. And again, Torres coming off 2 losses, wants to get back in the win column. This is a very tough matchup and one that I would think back against the wall for Torres, while Zhang has everything to gain as well, as would probably be vaulted into a title eliminator after this fight if she was able to win that, right into the title picture there as well. So ton on the line here. I would say more so for Zhang, but Torres needs to get back on track after 2 losses. And again, Torres is the type of girl with the type of pedigree that will a 3rd loss get her cut from the organization? No, she's still going to be a staple. She's still going to, do her thing and go to decision and put on a classic women's fight. So Zhang certainly has more to gain, but Torres, needs to get back on track here if she ever wants to get back in that discussion. I just don't think it would. It's, this is just a little bit of a bad matchup for someone that just does things a little bit better at this stage with a girl like Zhang. So definitely would side towards Zhang in the -120 range.
The first 3 fights here for this card on UFC Fight Pass, the next 4 on ESPN. The first of the pay-per-view fights, and there are 5 of them, Cody Garbrandt takes on Pedro Munoz. Garbrandt -140 favorite here in this one. I know you've got some thoughts on this fight as well.
Yeah, Garbrandt here. I mean, this is the mental aspect of UFC that we always talk about, because for the first time in his life, after starting 11-0 and lighting the world on fire in the mixed martial arts community, Garbrandt is, back against the wall, losing 2 straight. Granted, it was against the same opponent, so it's looked at a little bit differently. I think in some ways, much like we talked about, at the top of the show, it's just a fighter that does something a little bit better, uses like the Usman and Woodley fight. Dillashaw used Garbrandt's game plan and just did a better job of it. So I don't look at it as, a 2-fight losing streak, although, that's what the scoreboard's going to say. He lost to the same guy twice, and the guy just has his number. And I think that there's something to be said for that. But when you look at this, Garbrandt doesn't need to go back to the drawing board, in my opinion here. He needs to kind of put that Dillashaw saga out of his mind and go back to what he does. He just ran up to a guy that has his number. And if he's able to do that, again, doing this blanketly across the board, he's the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. No doubt about it against a guy like Munoz. Munoz, certainly dangerous, the best guillotine in the division that he can hit from absolutely anywhere. Always dangerous. Garbrandt needs to get back to, what he did pre-Dillashaw, which is use the distance, use the point fighting, use his, all-American wrestling, use everything that he kind of, before he fell in love with that unbelievable, right hand of his and all that type of stuff, the flash. This is something of there's a cautionary tale in here amongst many fighters, of where Garbrandt could go here, whether it be the route of Lando Venata or, falling in love with flash is a very, very dangerous thing. When you just get down to basics, Garbrandt is, a top 2 to top 3 in the division. And if he executes his game plan, doesn't let the, last 2 fights creep into his head, I actually think you're getting a little bit of a discount on a guy like Garbrandt. Again, not to take anything away from Munoz. I just think that when you look at it across the board, Garbrandt, the far and away more well-rounded fight. But if Dillashaw is still in his mind, and again, the weird thing about this fight is there's not really, Garbrandt can't fight Dillashaw again. They're not going to make that fight again. It's very clear what happens when those 2 fight. So he has to wait for Dillashaw to drop the belt or lose a fight to kind of go up again. And so if any of those things are kind of in the back of his mind, that could certainly spell trouble for him. But I think that is actually a little bit built into the line and where that discount comes from here.
All right, so as we look at the rest of the card here, 7 other matchups. Again, 5 on the main card, which is on pay-per-view. What do you think about the prelims? Anything stand out to you there?
Yeah, I think, a name that casual fans will recognize, Jeremy Stevens in the +200 range against Zabit Magomedsharipov. And Zabit has been the whitest, hottest prospect to come into the UFC in a very long time. And, putting on wars for the casual fan with Kyle Bochniak and submissions. And he's done everything. He has passed every test with flying colors. And so I understand this line being a little bit wide as it is. And there's a little bit of a, misguided notion on Jeremy Stevens. People think he is this brilliant knockout artist. And he is. crazy knockout numbers throughout his career. But if you look back, I mean, 1 knockout in his last 10 fights. And at this point, he's good for a knockout about every 2 years. I know he's had the back-to-back ones of Choi and Emmett. I understand that. But I look at that as, I don't think, Stevens is quote unquote back. I think that was just the quality of opponent in Emmett and Choi. And so it's been really, I want to say interesting, but I think the pendulum has just swung so far in the direction of Stevens is this brilliant knockout artist where, I understand he has 19 career knockouts, but those were very early on in his career. And we're talking about a guy in Stevens who has the resume that rivals, Donald Cerrone in terms of activeness and knockouts and all that type of stuff. Look, Zabit is he has passed every test. They're trying to work him towards a title opportunity. That's what this fight is. It's a brand name that UFC casual fans will know. So when they see him, they understand who he is and who he is beaten. Zabit needs to respect that power. As again, I know I kind of sound back and forth on, is Stevens a knockout artist? Is he not? I just think that if you're able to plan for it, you can kind of work around it. And that's what Zabit is built to do. He is long. He is lanky. He can use his wrestling, keep Stevens on the ground. This fight in a perfect world for Zabit is a takedown, lays on him for 3 minutes. They stand them up, or 5 minutes, they stand him up, and then he does it 2 more times, and he wins at 30-27. If he wants to stand and bang with him, look, Zabit proved that he can stand and bang with Kyle Bochniak in a war that UFC fans will remember very fondly for a very long time. Bochniak does not have the finishing power of Jeremy Stevens. That is for sure. And if that was Stevens in that firefight, I don't know that Zabit would have been able to stand that. But I do think that Zabit has the fight IQ and has the coaching staff behind him to know that, plan for it, and keep this fight on the ground and win a very comfortable decision.
All right. So anything else on the prelim card that you're looking at here? I know you mentioned Diego Sanchez is a pretty interesting fight against Mickey Gall.
Yeah, and Mickey Gall is a guy that, quite frankly, I don't think is, say very good, because I have the utmost respect for anyone who steps into a UFC octagon. But I think he's been he's been fortunate to have the quality of opponents and stages at the career that he's had, and I'm not sure why. I understand it with a guy like Sage Northcutt, certainly. Look, Mickey Gall is, like we talked about with Manny Bermudez, and again, I know Bermudez won that fight using his one trick. Mickey Gall is a one-trick pony. He uses the rear naked choke like it's his WWE finisher. He has won, every fight, 5 fights by rear naked choke. The only problem with that is while Diego Sanchez is quote-unquote washed up, quote-unquote chinny, quote-unquote whatever you want to call him at this stage of his career, never been submitted. And when you have a one-dimensional fighter who's going up against a veteran like that, whose strength is their one dimension, this is kind of, 2 rocks being banged up against each other here. Diego Sanchez is not what he used to be. I completely understand that. But for Mickey Gall at minus 225, you're betting on him getting a rear naked choke on a guy who's never been submitted. That's just not something long-term I would get into the business of doing. And again, Diego Sanchez coming in as a very similar priced underdog in his last fight via decision. Personally, I just think that the veteran savvy, if you will, of Sanchez should be able, Mickey Gall does one thing very good. He's good at getting takedowns and taking the back, as you've seen. And if he's able to do that against Sanchez, I think you tip your cap and move on. But to me, the plus 205 or even the over makes some sense here. And again, this is very cut and dry. If Gall is going to win, I don't see Gall being able to win a decision. I think this is a rear naked choke. It's a submission along the way. And until Sanchez proves that he's able to be submitted, I can't lay minus 225 or anything close to it there. So the underdog makes some sense at plus 205.
Any other barking dogs on the prelim card?
Yeah, smaller dog here in the plus 120, plus 130 range here. Johnny Walker, Misha Serkinov. Johnny Walker, again, I feel like we talk about this guy every single time because all he does is fight in 2019, and he is on a meteoric rise as a prospect. He's stepping in on short notice for Ovince St. Preux, with about just a month removed from his last fight. And look, Johnny Walker has looked good. I really do worry about this timetable for him. There's certain situations in the UFC where a fighter can, quote unquote, smell themselves or kind of be, kind of buy into their own hype. And I think that Johnny Walker feels a little bit like he's invincible right now. And now look, as he should, he has come in and set the UFC on fire. And you can't take anything away from the kid for that. You look at a guy like Serkinov, though, he had the same pedigree when he came into the UFC. And so, look, there's, Walker, there's a chance, and not in a good way, that he, gets a little too much Uriah Hall or Lando Venata into his game if he relies on the, the variance of his flashy finishes. And those are not always going to be there. I need to see him kind of bite down when nothing else works and, make that fight, win a fight he probably should have lost. And at the price of -150, I think this should be much closer to a pick'em. Cirkunov finished 8 of his last 12s via submission. I just think this is just not a great matchup for Walker, especially on short notice. I think that he wants to kind of get in there, stand and bang, and I think Cirkunov is just, crafty might be the word, to work a submission in there. So the +120 range of Misha Cirkunov certainly makes some sense as well.
Christian Pina, whose work you can check out on the Gambling Podcast. You can read his UFC 235 preview over at BangTheBook.com, and also follow him on Twitter at Christian Pina, Pina. Always appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much for breaking this down with us. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, buddy. Good luck this weekend.